Well, Labor says they aren't running a big Australia policy, but as the coalition says, we should judge them on their facts, not their rhetoric. Our nation's immigration intake hit record numbers in January, a net increase of more than 55,000, despite Albo telling us he would slow it down. Australians who can't find a place to live, who are bogged down in mortgage repayments, or those struggling to pay multiple rent increases, they are feeling it. Migration is fueling demand for already limited supply. Last week, Senator Dave Sharma called to halt migration until we can catch up and build more housing. But the reality is nobody has ever voted for a big Australia. On Monday, the Senate rejected Pauline Hanson's bill for a plebiscite on immigration. She maintains it's fundamental that people get their say.
Here's what I said in my maiden speech as the member for Oxley. In 1996, immigration must be halted in the short term. I was called racist, of course, by the major parties and big media who are in lockstep of a big Australia.
But that debate can be problematic. Some say it is racist or xenophobic to discuss immigration levels. Our next question for the jury: does Australia need a plebiscite on immigration? Joining us is William Bourke, founder of the Sustainable Australia Party, along with Stephanie De Pasqua, New South Wales Liberal Party MP. Hi to both of you. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. William, Australia's population is expected to almost double in the next 5 decades. Clearly, that's not a sustainable number, but why do you think we should go as far as to say we need a plebiscite on immigration?
Good question, Danica. Look, I don't agree with Pauline Hanson that we should stop immigration or halt immigration, but I believe we should lower immigration back to a sustainable and sensible level. We had around 70,000 migrants per annum in the last century. That was a sensible and sustainable level, 70,000. At the moment, we've gone way up, over 200,000 as an average and over 500,000 in the last 12 months. That is not sustainable from any point of view, and we should have a plebiscite, not about stopping immigration, but about returning to a sensible cap of around 70,000 per annum.
Yeah, correct. I don't think it's about stopping it, and you can see why migrants do want to come to our beautiful country. But Stephanie, at the rate we're going, surely that's unsustainable. Why don't you think we should have a plebiscite on immigration?
Look, Danica, do we need a plebiscite on immigration? Well, let's start with the cost of a plebiscite. Now, in 2017, when we had a plebiscite on same-sex marriage, that cost us $120 million. Now, last year, we had a referendum on The Voice. That cost around about, we estimate, around $400 million. That's a significant amount of money. Now, when I go out in my community, they tell me that we need infrastructure. Well, $400 million could fund our local hospital. It could be put towards investing in more schools, investing in public transport, and in our already congested roads. So when we think of cost, well, I'm saying let's have a sensible conversation, but do we need to do it in a plebiscite? We know that plebiscites are divisive. They put people in yes and no camps. Well, there's a lot of nuance in the immigration debate, and I don't think it's helpful to divide people into yes or no, because there's so much nuance that we need to be talking about. We need skilled migration, we need migration to fill industry shortages. So is the plebiscite the best way to talk about and influence migration levels? Well, no, I don't think so.
William, what do you think about that? Do we risk dividing the public? As we said before, this debate gets stifled because of accusations of racism. People say, well, it's xenophobic. What do you think?
Well, I think it's unfortunate that we do have Pauline Hanson as almost the face of anti-immigration in this country.
Sure.
I'm pro-immigration, and I think that extreme should be not dominating the debate like it does. I think we need a rational and mature discussion on this. But in terms of the cost of the continued rapid population growth, the states are going broke. Hundreds of billions of dollars in debt collectively because of the federal government's rapid population growth agenda. We can't afford as states to provide all of that infrastructure, and we're going broke as a state, New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland. So the cost of not having this discussion, the cost of not stabilising is massive.
OK, let's get some juror feedback. Paul, do you believe that we need a plebiscite on immigration?
Part of me thinks we do, only because that if you think of how immigration has been going over the past 12 months and the amount of people that we've brought in, we can barely sustain the amount of people that are here already. So if the governments were doing what we voted them in to do, and if we voted them in to limit immigration, if they were doing their job, then we wouldn't need a plebiscite. But the fact they're not doing their job, they might have to spend, you know, $20–30 million on it, but how much more are they going to spend on these people coming in on building up the extra housing with what, say, wind turbines or with solar panels? Yeah, that's not a debate, but how are they going to sustain all that as well? So, spend the extra money, have a plebiscite, and at least have the people of Australia vote with what we actually want them to do.
Yeah, fair call. Kelvin, what do you think?
I reckon our immigration is a little bit way too high, but to me, cost of living, the structure of all the transport infrastructure is just very lacking. But to me, for a plebiscite, I'd be saying a yes and a no, but part of me would be saying no.
No. OK. Kylie, do you think we need a plebiscite on immigration?
The sheer cost of a plebiscite? Absolutely not. Our elected members should be doing their jobs. I think that Anthony Albanese, Claire O'Neill, etc., they're really just letting us down.
I totally agree with you on that. The reality is we pay politicians to represent us. We have a federal election every 3 years. I'm not saying let's not have a conversation. I'm saying absolutely we need to have that conversation. We just don't need a divisive and costly plebiscite to do so. I'm a state MP. It's my job to go out into my community and talk to my community about the issues that are affecting them, and they are talking to me about housing affordability. And so we are looking at supply, but we also need the federal government to come to the party and look at demand.
And the challenge there is, Stephanie and Danica, the politicians are not really listening and then acting. So we've had decades of Australians through polls saying 70% do not want this big Australia record migration intake, and yet our politicians are not listening. You cannot trust politicians, generally speaking, and you certainly can't trust them on this issue. They have decades of misinformation. In the Howard era, they said, don't worry about population, we'll stabilise at 23 million by 2040. Then John Howard tripled immigration. Albo said, I'm going to cut immigration. Then he tripled immigration once he got in. You cannot trust politicians. We need the Australian people to have a say.
Well, what do you think about that, Stephanie? Because the reality is nobody voted for a big Australia, yet not the Liberal Party nor Labor have a plan to deal with it. We're heading into an election next year. Do you think the Liberal Party is going to come out with a policy on it?
Well, look, I can't answer for my federal colleagues, but I can tell you what we are doing in state. And our opposition leader, Mark Smeekman, is saying exactly what we're hearing out in our communities. It is a politician's job to speak to our community and bring that back. So when I speak to my party room about things like housing affordability, we need to talk about it. And that's why our federal leader, our state leader is saying, let's look at supply, but let's also look at demand. And he has put that invitation to Albanese, but it hasn't been answered. So, you know, we do have a federal government that's shortchanging New South Wales $1.65 billion in GST contributions. I'm saying that the money we would spend for a plebiscite, let's invest in infrastructure for our growing population now, and we have the mechanisms to be able to influence policy. We've got an election coming up, as you say. Let's talk about it now and make sure that it's an issue for the next election.
Well, there's no doubt. I think it's going to be talked about a lot. It certainly has ramped up. Look, you've both had your say. It is time to call on the jury. Jurors, you have 10 seconds to deliberate the following question. Does Australia need a plebiscite on immigration? OK, time is up. What is the jury's verdict? OK, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 yeses. The rest of you say no, that Australia does not need a plebiscite on immigration.